More now on that breaking news about the death of a giant of US politics, Henry Kissinger. Joining us now is Professor of Political Science at the University of California, Louis Desipio. Appreciate your time, Louis. He really was a giant of US affairs, but also global affairs over a period of many, many decades. What is his legacy? What legacy does he leave behind?
I think his primary legacy comes from that period in his career where he worked with President Nixon and President Ford to develop U.S. relations with China. Important work on peace in the Mideast, certainly that has frayed over time, but it was very important in its era. But also, I think the rise of sort of the president in the United States leading U.S. foreign policy secretly often in a way that guided global affairs in a way that we really hadn't seen prior to President Nixon and Mr. Kissinger.
It has been said that he did manage to wield power that is usually reserved for US presidents. How did he manage to do that?
Well, I think he had a willing accomplice in President Nixon, who had based his career in part on a greater knowledge of foreign policy than many of his peers in the United States Senate, and saw that as a way that he could distinguish his administration, particularly in an era where on domestic policy, President Nixon was a little more out of step with the American public. So Nixon placed foreign policy at the center of his administration in a way that a few presidents had, and he entrusted Mr. Kissinger with guiding that policy. And Kissinger had very clear ideas about what he wanted to do. Some of these, I think, very positive, certainly opening relations with China, but some very negative, crushing the democratically elected government in Chile, for example, and bombing in Cambodia and Laos that violated U.S. and international law. So Kissinger's vision allied with Nixon's in a way that allowed Nixon to claim leadership in the United States and globally.
And in his later years, after he had handed over those official roles, he continued this keen interest, obviously, in the world of diplomacy and was really seen as a sounding board for many leading figures right around the world over his last few decades.
Absolutely. We've been thinking a great deal about Jimmy Carter in the United States recently with the passing of Rosalynn. Kissinger had sort of the same kind of legacy that Carter did that lasted, well beyond his official powers. He advised every president subsequent to President Ford, the last time he held an official position in the United States government, and was also a sounding board for leaders from other countries. So Kissinger was able to sort of cement his gravitas as a sentient foreign policy leader, into his late 90s, and that's really quite remarkable.
It absolutely is, and a remarkable life. Professor Louis Desipio, really appreciate you joining us with your reaction as the tributes continue to flow in for Henry Kissinger. Thank you.